The morning sun spilled across the vast acres of the Grayson Ranch, where wealth and loneliness coexisted under the same roof. The ranch was owned by Edward Grayson, a man whose name carried weight across the county. He had more land than most families could dream of, horses that fetched prices high enough to buy entire houses, and cattle that multiplied his fortune year after year. Yet despite all his riches, Edward remained a man who trusted no one. Wealth had made him cautious, and betrayal had hardened him into someone who believed loyalty was rare and honesty even rarer. That was why when a poor widow named Clara came into his life, offering her service as a housekeeper, his suspicious nature refused to accept her at face value. Clara was everything Edward's staff whispered about in the ranch house. She was quiet yet strong, burdened yet graceful, a woman who had known more grief than comfort. Her husband had died in a tragic accident, leaving her with nothing but debts and a small daughter to feed. She had come to Edward humbly, asking only for work, not charity. Edward gave her a place under his roof, but not without hidden intentions. He had seen many women drawn to his ranch, not for the work but for the gold that glittered behind his name. He had been deceived before, and his pride had suffered enough scars to make him wary. So he devised a test, one that would reveal the true nature of the widow. One night Edward lay on his grand bed, the fire in the hearth flickering low, pretending to be asleep. He wanted to see what Clara would do when she believed no eyes were watching her. Would she try to open the chest where he kept his fortune? Would she take a ring from the tray near his bedside? Would she betray his trust like others had? With his heart steady but his breath feigned in rhythm, he waited in the silence of the room. The creak of the wooden floorboards alerted him when Clara entered quietly. She moved softly, carrying a small lamp, her shadow stretching across the walls. Edward's sharp eyes stayed closed, his ears drinking in every sound. She walked to his bedside, her steps unhurried, her breath shallow. For a moment, Edward's chest tightened. Was this the moment she revealed her greed? But what she did made his body go stiff with shock. Clara didn't reach for the jewelry box nor the purse of coins on the table. Instead, she carefully lifted the blanket higher to cover him from the draft seeping through the window. She touched the edges of the sheet gently, her movements filled with a care that Edward had not known in years. Her eyes studied his face, but not with desire for what he owned. Rather, with something close to pity. Then, as if guided by a secret prayer, she knelt by the bed and whispered words Edward would never forget. Lord, if this man has given me and my child shelter, bless him tenfold. Let no harm come to his sleep and let his heart find peace. For even if he doesn't trust me yet, I pray one day he will see. I am not here for gold, but for work and for the chance to keep my little girl alive. Edward's chest tightened with something unfamiliar, a mix of guilt, wonder, and an ache that reminded him of the humanity he had locked away long ago. He had expected deceit, but what he found was humility, gratitude, and a prayer so selfless that it pierced through the fortress of mistrust he had built around his soul. He froze beneath the blanket, unable to move, unable to reveal that he had heard every word. In that still moment, he realized his wealth had blinded him, not just to the greed of others, but also to the purity that still existed in some hearts. Yet he remained silent, deciding he would test her again. And as Clara blew out the lamp and left the room, Edward lay awake the rest of the night, haunted by a widow's whispered prayer. The following days passed, with Edward watching, Clara more intently, though always from the shadows of his suspicion. She worked tirelessly, her hands roughened by scrubbing floors and mending clothes, yet her spirit never seemed to break. What puzzled Edward most was her devotion not only to her chores but also to her little daughter, Mary. Each night Clara would sit by the child's bed and tell her stories, not of castles or princes, but of courage, faith, and kindness. Edward would find himself lingering outside the door, listening to the soft lull of her voice and the gentle laughter of her daughter. Slowly, cracks began to form in the wall of his mistrust. Still, the rancher wanted certainty, and so one stormy night he prepared his final test. He placed a bag heavy with silver coins on the dining table, where any passerby could easily see it. Then once again, he feigned exhaustion and lay upon the couch by the fire, pretending to drift into deep sleep. The rain hammered against the windows as Clara entered to check the fire. Her eyes fell upon the bag of coins. Edward could see through the slits of his lashes how her gaze lingered. His heart pounded. This was the moment of truth. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the bag ever so slightly. Edward held his breath, but instead of taking it, Clara sighed, shook her head, and murmured, "How many before me have seen this as a temptation? And yet I have no right to what is not mine. Lord, let me keep my heart clean, for I want no riches that come with shame." She then covered the bag with a cloth, as if to remove the temptation from her own sight, and turned to tend to the fire, ensuring Edward stayed warm through the night. That small act, covering the gold instead of taking it, broke Edward's last chain of doubt. The test was over. His wealth, his suspicions, his fear of betrayal, all seemed hollow compared to the quiet integrity of the widow who had asked only for work. The next morning, Edward rose early and called Clara to him. His voice, usually stern and commanding, now trembled with sincerity. "Clara," he said, "for days I have watched you, doubted you, tested you, and tonight I can no longer hide the truth. I pretended to sleep, not once but twice, to see what you would do. And both times you showed me not greed but grace. You prayed for me when you thought no one heard, and you rejected gold when you thought no one saw. Forgive me for doubting you, for you have shown me more honor than I have ever known." Clara stood speechless, her face pale, her hands clasping her apron. Then Edward did something that startled even himself. He lowered his head humbly and said, "You have given me more than loyalty. You have given me faith again." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, not from the thought of reward, but from the weight of being seen and believed. In that moment, something shifted between the rich rancher and the poor widow, a bridge of trust stronger than gold, built not on wealth but on integrity. Edward offered her not only permanent work, but a partnership in managing the ranch, ensuring she and her daughter would never know hunger or fear again. The man who once froze in suspicion now found himself warmed by the sincerity of a widow's heart.